My name is Victoria, and I am 33 years old. As I sat at my younger sister's lavish engagement dinner, my mother suddenly laughed and loudly told the groom's affluent family that I was nothing more than a charity case living off handouts. My father immediately chimed in, proudly stating that they had stopped financially supporting me years ago, so I could finally learn to stand on my own 2 feet. The entire private dining room chuckled politely, while my sister smirked maliciously from behind her crystal wine glass. I just sat there in absolute silence, taking a slow, deliberate sip of my sparkling water. What none of these arrogant people realized was that I was the one paying for the $40,000 gourmet dinner they were currently devouring, and I had also secretly purchased the flawless 3-carat diamond ring currently sitting on my sister's finger. I never expected my own parents to use me as a cheap punchline just to impress my future in-laws. Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe to this channel. If you have ever had to stand up to toxic family members who completely underestimated your worth, trust me, you will want to hear how this elegant evening turned into the ultimate lesson in brutal karma. The evening started at one of the most exclusive, Michelin-starred restaurants in downtown Chicago. The private dining room was bathed in warm, glowing light from a massive crystal chandelier overhead. My sister Serena, who is 28 years old, was the undisputed golden child of our family. She sat at the head of the table next to her fiancé, Marcus. Marcus is a 30-year-old orthopedic surgeon, and his family is part of the city's intellectual and financial elite. His mother, Evelyn, is a retired federal judge, and his father is a prominent university dean. They exuded a quiet, undeniable grace. My parents, Arthur and Margaret, were visibly desperate to prove they belonged in the exact same tax bracket. Our family dynamic had always been incredibly clear. Serena was the beautiful, supposedly successful lifestyle vlogger who could do absolutely no wrong. I was the quiet, invisible older sister who drove a beat-up Toyota Prius and wore practical, unbranded clothing. My parents assumed I was barely scraping by in some dismal, entry-level office job. They had absolutely no idea that I actually owned and operated a massive private equity firm, managing hundreds of millions of dollars in commercial real estate. I kept my vast wealth entirely hidden from them because I knew exactly how greedy and parasitic they could be. As the waiters gracefully cleared our gourmet appetizers, my mother decided it was the perfect moment to elevate Serena by tearing me down. Margaret leaned across the long mahogany table toward Evelyn, her voice artificially sweet and uncomfortably loud. "We are just so incredibly proud of Serena," my mother announced, waving her hand toward my sister with a bright, manufactured smile. "She is so driven, making a 6-figure income with her social media brand. It is such a massive relief as parents to see one of your children succeed so brilliantly." Evelyn offered a polite, measured smile. "Serena certainly seems passionate about her work. And what about you, Victoria? Marcus mentioned you work in finance." Before I could even open my mouth to answer the retired judge, my father Arthur cut me off with a loud, dismissive scoff. "Oh, Victoria just shuffles papers around in a tiny, cramped cubicle somewhere," my father said, waving his heavy silver fork in the air as if swatting away an annoying fly. "We honestly worry about her future all the time. She has always struggled to keep up with her peers. We had to cut off her financial aid a few years ago. We told her, 'You cannot live off handouts from your parents forever.' It is tough love, but she desperately needed to learn absolute independence." My mother let out a theatrical sigh, placing a hand over her chest to feign deep concern. "It is true. We love her, of course, but she is essentially the family charity case. We are just glad we could bring her along tonight to experience a real luxury meal for once." The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating, and incredibly awkward. Marcus shifted in his seat, his brow furrowing in deep confusion. He looked at Serena, who was busy admiring her own reflection in her butter knife, completely ignoring the blatant disrespect. Evelyn darted her sharp, analytical eyes from my mother to me. The retired judge instantly smelled the toxicity, but remained perfectly composed. I did not raise my voice. I did not cry. I did not even try to defend myself against their pathetic, fabricated lies. I simply took a slow sip of water and looked directly into my mother's eyes. I let the silence stretch out, allowing the sheer embarrassment of her cruelty to hang in the air for everyone to witness. They truly had no idea about the storm that was coming. The heavy silence in the private dining room was suddenly broken by the sharp clinking of a silver spoon against crystal. Marcus pushed his chair back and stood up at the head of the table. He was a tall man with a commanding presence, sharpened by years of navigating high-pressure surgical operating rooms. He adjusted his tailored suit jacket and looked down at my sister. Serena beamed up at him, her eyes shining with fake, practiced adoration. She was clearly expecting him to deliver a glowing, romantic tribute to their fake love story. My mother immediately reached for her phone to record the moment, whispering loudly to my father that they absolutely needed this footage for Serena's social media followers. But Marcus did not look at the camera. He did not raise his glass to my sister. Instead, he turned his gaze directly toward my parents. His expression was completely unreadable, entirely stripped of the polite warmth he had shown them all evening. "Arthur, Margaret," Marcus began, his deep voice carrying effortlessly across the room. "I want to thank you both for your candor tonight. It is always refreshing to hear parents speak so openly about their core values, especially regarding financial independence and the severe danger of living off handouts." My parents puffed out their chests, completely mistaking his icy coldness for agreement. My father nodded vigorously, taking a large gulp of his expensive scotch. "Exactly, Marcus. It is all about building character," my father declared with a smug, arrogant grin. Marcus did not smile. He rested his hands on the edge of the table and leaned forward slightly. "I completely agree," Marcus said smoothly. "And because my family values absolute honesty above everything else, I feel it is only right to set the record straight before we proceed with any celebrations tonight." Evelyn, Marcus's mother, sat perfectly still, her eyes locked onto her son with an expression of intense focus. She knew him well enough to recognize the dangerous steel hidden in his voice. Serena's fake smile began to falter. "Marcus, baby, what are you doing?" she whispered, reaching out to tug at his sleeve. He gently but firmly pulled his arm away from her grasp. "You see, Arthur," Marcus continued, ignoring my sister entirely. "I was quite surprised to hear you speak so harshly about Victoria needing charity, especially considering the fact that Victoria is the absolute only reason any of us are sitting in this Michelin-starred restaurant right now." My mother let out a nervous, high-pitched laugh that sounded like scraping metal. "Oh, Marcus, please," she stammered, waving her hand frantically. "Do not let Victoria's little finance job fool you. She could never afford a place like this on her own." Marcus pulled a neatly folded piece of paper from his inner jacket pocket and dropped it directly onto the center of the table. It was the restaurant's final receipt. "Actually, Margaret, she can," Marcus stated, his voice echoing in the sudden quiet. "I spoke with the maitre d' before we sat down because I intended to treat everyone tonight. But I was informed that the bill had already been settled in full. A $40,000 tab, prepaid on a black card belonging strictly to Victoria." The color instantly drained from my mother's heavily contoured face. My father choked on his scotch, coughing violently into his linen napkin. The entire table stared at the receipt sitting under the bright chandelier light, but Marcus was not finished. He turned to look down at Serena, who was now staring up at him with wide, genuinely terrified eyes. "And since we are on the topic of financial independence," Marcus said, his tone dropping an octave, "I think it is time your parents knew the actual truth about the ring on your finger." Serena gasped and quickly covered her left hand, but it was far too late. "When Serena and I went ring shopping," Marcus explained, "I offered to buy a reasonably priced band. But Serena insisted on the 3-carat flawless diamond. She told me she paid the massive difference herself using her brand deal money. But last week, I accidentally saw the email receipt left open on her laptop screen. Serena did not pay for it. Victoria did. Victoria bought her own sister's engagement ring so Serena could pretend to be wildly wealthy on the internet." A suffocating, heavy silence slammed into the room. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Evelyn slowly picked up her wine glass, her sharp eyes darting over to me with newfound, profound respect. My mother looked like she was going to faint, staring at the massive diamond on Serena's trembling hand. My father's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water, totally unable to formulate any believable excuse. I sat completely still, holding my mother's horrified gaze. Marcus slowly adjusted his rigid stance. I refuse to build a marriage on a foundation of cheap, pathetic lies, he said quietly. Before Marcus could add another word, my father Upley pushed his chair back. The wooden legs scraped harshly against the hardwood floor. He marched around the table, his face flushed a dark, angry red, and grabbed my upper arm with a grip meant to bruise. "We are stepping into the private lounge next door right now," my father hissed through clenched teeth. "Margaret, bring Serena. We need to handle this family matter privately." He practically dragged me out of the main dining room, away from the shocked stares of Marcus and his parents. We crossed a short hallway and burst into a VIP antechamber. As soon as the heavy oak door clicked shut behind us, the entire illusion of our perfect family shattered completely. Serena let out a piercing sob. She threw her imported designer clutch across the room, where it smacked loudly against a velvet sofa. "You ruined absolutely everything," she screamed, pointing a manicured finger right at my face. "You could not just let me have one special night. You always have to make everything about you." My mother rushed to Serena's side, wrapping her arms around her golden child and glaring at me as if I had just committed murder. Serena was 28, but whenever she faced the slightest inconvenience, she regressed into a screaming toddler. For years, she had been maxing out credit cards to fund her glamorous internet lifestyle, buying imported handbags, and booking first-class flights she could never afford. My parents always bailated her out, covering her massive debts while telling their elite friends how successful she was. Meanwhile, I was the designated scapegoat. If I needed a small loan for college textbooks, I was given a harsh lecture on fiscal responsibility. If Serena needed $10,000 for a luxury wellness retreat, it was considered a necessary business investment. "How did you do it, Victoria?" my mother snapped, her voice trembling with intense, unfiltered rage. "Whose credit card did you steal to pull this sick stunt? You work in a tiny cubicle. There is no way you legally paid for that dinner or that diamond ring. Explain yourself before I call the police." I gently pried my father's heavy hand off my arm and took a deliberate step back, smoothing the front of my dress. "I did not steal anything," I replied calmly. "It is my money. I earned it, and I chose to pay because I knew Serena was drowning in severe debt, and Marcus deserved to know the absolute truth." Serena let out a bitter, mocking laugh. "Your money, please. You probably found some ancient, desperate sugar daddy to fund this entire charade. You definitely slept with a rich old man just to humiliate me in front of my future husband. You are so pathetic. You are so violently jealous of me that you would sink to being a high-priced escort just to steal my spotlight." She stomped her foot, tears streaming down her contoured face. "Marcus is an incredible doctor. His family is literal royalty in this city. Do you have any idea how hard I worked to secure this engagement, and you just destroyed it all because you are miserable and alone?" I stared at her, genuinely amazed by her vast delusion. "Secure this engagement? You talk about him like he is a business acquisition," I said softly. "I paid because the jeweler was about to decline your payment. I was standing right next to you when your 3 credit cards bounced. I stepped in so you would not be deeply humiliated in the store, and you promised me you would tell Marcus the truth. Instead, you lied directly to his face and took all the credit." My father stepped directly between us, his chest puffed out aggressively. "That is enough," he roared, his voice echoing in the small room. "I do not care how you got the money. Maybe you took out a predatory loan, or maybe you are doing something entirely illegal. What I care about is that you sabotaged your sister. Serena is building an empire. She needs to project an image of endless success. You have nothing going on in your pathetic life, so you decided to drag her down to your miserable level." He pointed a thick, trembling finger directly at my chest. "You are going to march right back out there, and you are going to tell Marcus that you lied. You will tell him that you were jealous, that you stole Serena's receipt, and that she paid for everything herself. If you do not fix this right now, I swear to you, Victoria, there will be severe consequences for your actions." My mother nodded vigorously, stroking Serena's hair. "You owe her this much. You have always been a dark cloud hanging over this family. For once in your life, do the right thing and protect your sister." I looked at my parents, feeling a sudden wave of absolute disgust completely replace any lingering sadness. "I am not going out there to lie to Marcus," I said, keeping my voice dangerously steady. "I am done covering up for Serena's financial disasters." My father's face contorted into an ugly sneer. "Fine," he spat out, stepping so close I could smell the expensive scotch on his breath. "If why?" Oh, refuse to fix this. Consider yourself completely cut off. Tomorrow morning, I am calling my attorney to remove your name from the family trust. You will not see a single penny of the generational wealth I have built. Everything will go directly to Serena. You will be left with absolutely nothing, Victoria. Just your pathetic cubicle job and your miserable life. He crossed his arms, clearly expecting me to fall to my knees and beg for his forgiveness. Instead, a short, humorous laugh escaped my lips. My mother gasped in dramatic horror at my reaction. "Are you actually laughing?" Margaret shrieked, her face turning pale. "Your father is threatening to disinherit you, and you think this is funny? You are completely unhinged." I slowly shook my head, locking eyes with my father. "I am laughing because you cannot disinherit someone from a bank account that has a zero balance, Arthur." My father's confident posture instantly collapsed, his shoulders dropping as his eyes darted nervously toward my mother. Margaret looked confused, glancing between the two of us. "What is she talking about?" my mother asked, her voice faltering. I took a step forward, forcing my father to step back. "The famous family trust," I said clearly. "The massive fortune you used to control everyone around you. Let us tell Margaret and Serena the truth about where all that money actually went." My father held up his hands, his face suddenly slick with cold sweat. "Victoria, shut your mouth right now," he hissed frantically. But I was entirely done keeping his dark secrets. 5 years ago, I announced to the room, my father was slapped with a massive corporate harassment lawsuit by 2 of his former female employees. To avoid going to federal prison and facing total public humiliation, he needed $500,000 for an out-of-court settlement. So he quietly drained the entire family trust. Every single dollar of our supposed generational wealth was handed over to keep him out of a jail cell. Serena gasped loudly, her hands flying to her mouth. My mother stumbled backward, hitting the edge of the velvet sofa. "You lied to me," my mother whispered, staring at my father in absolute horror. "You told me that money was tied up in long-term overseas investments." I did not let my father speak. "It gets worse," I continued relentlessly. "Even after he emptied the trust, he was still $60,000 short on his legal fees. He came to my tiny apartment crying, begging me to help him. I dropped out of my master's degree program. I worked 3 grueling jobs. I bartended at night, did freelance data processing on weekends, and tutored college students during the day. I sacrificed 2 entire years of my life to pay off his hidden debts, so the bank would not foreclose on this family's home. And what did you do, Arthur? You took out a new credit card and sent Serena on a luxury vacation to Europe so she would not get suspicious. You threw my future into the garbage to protect your own fragile pride, and you have the absolute nerve to call me a charity case." I stared at him, watching the arrogant patriarch shrink into a pathetic, hollow shell. Suddenly, the heavy oak door to the VIP lounge creaked open. We all froze and turned around. Evelyn stood in the doorway, her posture perfectly straight, her eyes sharp and calculating. The retired federal judge had followed us from the dining room and had clearly heard every single word of my confession. My father let out a weak, pathetic groan. Evelyn stepped into the room, smoothly closing the door behind her. She did not look angry. She looked incredibly dangerous. "Well," Evelyn said, her voice smooth and chillingly calm. "As a former judge, I have presided over hundreds of fraud and harassment cases. I must admit, Arthur, hiding a major legal settlement from your spouse while extorting your oldest daughter is quite a fascinating display of character." She calmly pulled out a small leather notebook. Evelyn looked directly at me, offering a subtle, approving nod before turning her icy gaze back to my terrified parents. "I think my son and I need to have a very serious conversation about his future with this family," she said quietly, writing something down. "Because we simply do not merge assets with such massive liabilities." The heavy oak door clicked shut behind Evelyn, leaving my parents and sister suffocating in their exposed lies. I did not wait for my father to formulate another pathetic excuse, or for my mother to start her theatrical weeping. I simply picked up my purse and walked out of the VIP room without looking back. I drove straight home to my luxury penthouse in peaceful silence. However, I knew my toxic family too well. They were cornered animals, and cornered animals always attack. The next morning, I woke up at 6 a.m. The moment I reached for my phone on the nightstand, the screen illuminated with a barrage of notifications. There were over 80 missed calls and hundreds of unread text messages. I sat up against my headboard and unlocked the screen. These were not apologies from my parents. They were vicious attacks from my extended family. The flying monkeys had been officially deployed. My Aunt Brenda sent a paragraph calling me a jealous monster who hated seeing others happy. My cousin Matthew texted that I was a massive disappointment to the bloodline. My phone buzzed again with a message from my Uncle Greg, demanding I publicly apologize for lying about paying for the restaurant bill. Clearly, my parents and Serena had spent the night spinning a wild narrative to protect their fragile egos. I did not reply to a single message. Instead, I opened social media to see exactly what kind of damage control my sister was attempting. At the top of my feed was a new video posted by Serena to her 50,000 followers. The thumbnail showed her sitting on the floor of her bedroom, clutching a tissue with mascara dramatically smeared under her eyes. It was a masterclass in emotional manipulation. I tapped the screen and watched her perform. "Hey guys," Serena said to the camera, her voice trembling. "I am making this video because I always promised to be authentic with you. Last night was supposed to be the most magical night of my life. I got engaged to the man of my dreams." But my older sister, who has always struggled with severe narcissistic tendencies, decided to ruin it. She paused dramatically and wiped a fake tear away. She showed up to our intimate family dinner completely uninvited. She has been struggling financially for years, and my parents had to recently cut her off because she refused to get her life together. So out of pure jealousy, she threw a massive tantrum, made up these horrible lies about my fiancé, and tried to claim she bought my engagement ring. It is just so heartbreaking when someone you love is so deeply sick and unhappy that they want to destroy your joy. The video continued with Serena claiming that Marcus was just overwhelmed by my crazy behavior, but that their relationship was stronger than ever. She ended the video asking her followers to send positive energy during this painful family crisis. The comments were a complete disaster. Thousands of strangers were dragging my name through the mud. They were calling me a toxic narcissist, a broke loser, and a pathetic spinster. Serena was soaking up the sympathy, replying to comments with heart emojis and expressing how brave she felt for speaking her truth. She was monetizing her own lies, using my character as the sacrificial lamb to boost her social media engagement. A younger, weaker version of me might have cried. I might have called my parents, begging for them to tell the truth. I might have panicked and tried to defend myself in the comments. But at 33 years old, sitting in a luxury penthouse that I bought with pure cash, I felt absolutely nothing but a cold, calculated sense of clarity. Serena had just handed me the exact weapon I needed. I calmly screen-recorded the entire video before she could realize the legal implications of her actions and delete it. I took screenshots of her defamatory replies to the comments. Then I took screenshots of every single abusive text message sent by my extended family members. I compiled all the evidence into a neat, organized digital folder. I opened my email application and drafted a message to the senior partner at the corporate law firm that represented my private equity company. The subject line was simply, "Defamation and Harassment **." I attached the folder and typed a brief message. "Please review the attached evidence. My family has decided to launch a public smear campaign. Prepare the necessary cease and desist orders, but hold them for now. Let them dig the hole a little deeper." I hit send, placed my phone face down on the nightstand, and got out of bed to brew a cup of expensive coffee. The trap was perfectly set for their total destruction. While I was peacefully drinking my coffee and organizing my evidence, my parents were sitting in their mortgaged living room in a state of absolute panic. The revelation from the night before had completely shattered their carefully constructed reality. It was not just the embarrassment of being exposed in front of Marcus and his mother. It was the undeniable realization that their scapegoat daughter, the one they had mocked and dismissed for years, possessed a black card and had easily dropped $40,000 on a single dinner. The greed immediately began to fester in the mind of my father. He paced back and forth across the hardwood floor, frantically running the numbers. Serena was sobbing on the expensive couch, clutching a stack of past-due invoices from her wedding planner. The luxury venue, the imported floral arrangements, and the custom wedding dress were all demanding their final payments. Serena had maxed out her credit cards, and Arthur had no cash left to bail her out. If they did not find a massive injection of fund. Within the week, the entire wedding would be canceled. Their fraudulent high society image would be destroyed forever, and they would become the absolute laughingstock of their community. Margaret watched her husband pace, her eyes narrowing as a dark, desperate idea began to form. She stood up and smoothed the fabric of her expensive designer blouse. "Arthur," she said quietly, "if Victoria has that kind of money, she is obviously hiding it from us. She is unwell, and she has always been completely detached from this family, living in her own little world. Maybe she is not in her right mind at all." My father stopped pacing and looked directly at his wife. A slow, sinister smile spread across his face as he understood exactly what she was implying. They did not see my financial success as a reason to respect me. They saw it as an unprotected asset waiting to be aggressively claimed. Within an hour, my parents were sitting in the dimly lit office of a notoriously aggressive family law attorney named Victor Vance. Victor was widely known around the city for taking on cases that honest, ethical lawyers absolutely refused to touch. He sat behind a massive mahogany desk, steepling his fingers as my parents spun a vicious web of absolute lies. My father leaned forward, looking deeply concerned and acting like a devoted parent. "Our daughter Victoria is suffering from severe mental instability," Arthur lied incredibly smoothly. "She is exhibiting highly erratic behavior, hoarding massive amounts of money, and making bizarre aggressive claims against her younger sister. We are terrified that she is going to hurt herself or fall victim to dangerous financial scammers. We need to step in and protect her assets before she destroys her own life entirely." Victor Vance smiled a cold, calculating smile because he knew exactly what my parents were doing. He only cared about billing them for his exorbitant hourly rate. "What you are looking for is a legal conservatorship," Victor explained clearly. "It is a legal mechanism where the court grants you full, unrestricted control over your daughter's personal and financial affairs. If we can convince a judge that she lacks the capacity to manage her own estate due to severe psychological distress, you will be granted immediate access to all her bank accounts, properties, and corporate investments. You will have total authority over how every single dollar of her money is spent. This power is ostensibly granted for her own care and the overall care of her family members." Serena, who had excitedly tagged along to the legal meeting, perked up instantly. "So, if we get this conservatorship approved, we could legally use her money to pay for my expensive wedding?" Serena asked eagerly. "Because technically, keeping the family happy and stable is considered part of her psychological care, right?" Victor nodded slowly and confirmed that as her legal guardians, her parents would indeed have broad discretion over her finances. My mother clapped her hands together in delight, completely ignoring the sheer monstrosity of what they were actively plotting against my freedom. They were planning to use the justice system to strip me of my human rights, steal my hard-earned wealth, and reduce me to a financial hostage just to fund a lavish party. My father pulled out his credit card, maxing out the last available limit to pay Victor Vance's hefty retainer fee. "Draw up the paperwork," my father ordered sternly. "I want the petition filed with the court by tomorrow morning. We will claim she had a violent psychotic break at the restaurant last night." Victor began typing on his computer, the legal trap loudly snapping shut. They walked out of that office feeling incredibly powerful. While my parents walked out of that law office feeling incredibly powerful, I was miles away living a reality they could not possibly comprehend. Later that morning, I merged my beat-up Toyota Prius onto the busy Chicago highway. My family always mocked this car. They thought I drove it because I was broke. Serena constantly made fun of the faded paint. In truth, I drove it because it was reliable, fuel-efficient, and I never felt the desperate need to perform fake wealth for strangers. I navigated toward the financial district, pulling up to the security gates of a towering glass skyscraper. The security guard immediately smiled and opened the private VIP entrance. I drove my old Prius down into the brightly lit underground garage and parked directly between a Bentley and a Porsche. My parking space was the oversized executive spot marked specifically for the chief executive officer. I grabbed my briefcase, walked to the private elevator, and scanned my biometric fingerprint on the security pad to access the penthouse level. The polished steel elevator doors slid open with a soft chime, revealing the breathtaking lobby of Apex Vanguard Holdings. This was my hidden empire, a fortress built entirely without my family's knowledge. I founded the firm 7 years ago with the money I had painstakingly saved, traded, and invested after paying off my father's hidden legal debts. Today, Apex Vanguard managed over $800 million in high-yield real estate acquisitions and private equity portfolios. As I walked down the sleek glass corridor, senior investment bankers in custom-tailored suits nodded respectfully in my direction. "Good morning, Miss Victoria." My executive assistant greeted me warmly, handing me a fresh double espresso and a thick stack of morning financial briefings. I thanked her and walked into my expansive corner office, which featured panoramic floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the entire downtown city skyline. I sat behind my black marble desk, took a sip of the espresso, and opened my secure laptop to begin reviewing a $50 million commercial property acquisition. 10 minutes later, there was a sharp knock on my frosted glass door. My lead corporate attorney, William, stepped into the room. William was a brilliant, ruthless legal mind who expertly handled all my corporate litigation. However, this morning he looked unusually tense. His jaw clenched tight. He placed a heavy legal folder directly onto the center of my desk. "We have a very serious situation developing," William said, taking a seat opposite me. "I just received an urgent legal notification from the county courthouse. Your parents, Arthur and Margaret, have officially filed an emergency petition for a legal conservatorship over you. They retained Victor Vance, a notoriously dirty family law attorney known for destroying lives. They are falsely claiming to the court that you recently suffered a severe psychotic break, that you are irrationally hoarding wealth, and that you completely lack the mental capacity to manage your own affairs. They are asking a presiding judge to grant them immediate control over your estate to ostensibly protect you from yourself." William leaned forward, his expression dead serious. "Victoria, this is not a joke. Vance knows exactly how to manipulate the court system. If a judge grants even a temporary emergency order based on their fabricated statements, your parents could instantly freeze your bank accounts and lock you out of Apex Vanguard. We need to file an injunction immediately to block this petition before it reaches a hearing." I looked down at the official court documents. I saw my father's signature boldly scrolled at the bottom of the page, full of overwhelming arrogance and unchecked greed. Instead of panicking, I leaned back in my leather chair and let out a soft, genuine laugh. William looked at me in confusion, clearly expecting me to be terrified. I closed the heavy folder and pushed it back across the marble desk. "Do not block it, William," I said calmly. "Let them file it. Let them bring this circus straight to a judge." William shook his head in disbelief. "But why would you willingly risk opening the door to a conservatorship battle?" I smiled coldly, looking out at the city skyline below my window. "Because, William, filing this specific legal petition forces a mandatory financial discovery phase in order to legally prove they are financially responsible and fit to manage my vast wealth. My parents will be mandated to open their own private financial books to the court. They will have to expose their massive credit card debts, their foreclosed mortgages, and Serena's unpaid wedding bills under the strict penalty of perjury. They think they are setting a trap for me, but they just handed us the absolute right to completely destroy them." After William left my office to begin preparing our legal counterstrike, my private cell phone buzzed on the marble desk. The caller ID displayed an unknown number. I normally let those go to voicemail, but something compelled me to answer. It was Marcus. His voice sounded strained, completely stripped of the confident warmth he usually carried. He asked if we could meet immediately in person, somewhere far away from my sister and her constant social media filming. I agreed and directed him to a quiet, independent coffee shop tucked away on a side street near the hospital where he worked. I arrived 15 minutes later. Marcus was already sitting in a dark leather booth in the back corner. He was still wearing his blue surgical scrubs, looking exhausted. He had a black coffee in front of him, untouched. When I slid into the booth across from him, he looked up and let out a heavy sigh. I did not even bother with small talk. I simply asked him what happened after I walked out of the VIP room last night. Marcus rubbed his temples. He told me that after his mother and I left, Serena immediately threw another massive tantrum. She demanded that Marcus buy her a brand new car right then and there to make up for the severe emotional trauma I had supposedly caused her. Marcus said he looked at her crying on the floor and felt nothing but absolute disgust. He final. Why saw the real Serena, the spoiled, entitled manipulator hiding behind a curated internet persona. He realized he was engaged to a woman who only valued him as an endless ATM machine, but the situation had escalated far beyond Serena's petty demands. Marcus leaned across the small wooden table, lowering his voice. "Your father cornered me this morning before my shift," Marcus explained, his eyes burning with quiet anger. Arthur showed up at the hospital parking garage holding a thick legal document. He demanded that I sign a contract right there on the hood of my car. It was a promissory note for $200,000. Arthur called it a temporary family loan to cover the remaining vendor invoices for the wedding. He told me that since I was joining the family, it was my absolute duty to protect Serena's public image and ensure the event was flawless. I stared at Marcus, completely amazed by my father's sheer audacity. "He tried to extort you in a hospital parking lot?" I asked flatly. Marcus nodded. "He told me that if I refused to sign the loan agreement, he would personally cancel the wedding today. Arthur threatened to go to the local press and the country club board to claim I had physically abused Serena, ruining my medical career and my family's spotless reputation. And to top it all off, Arthur explicitly stated that they were keeping the 3-carat diamond ring as compensation for their wasted time, completely ignoring the fact that you were the one who paid for it." Marcus leaned back against the booth. He confessed that he no longer wanted to marry Serena. The illusion was completely shattered. However, his family had already invested significant social capital into this union, and his mother, Evelyn, had invited several high-profile federal judges to the wedding. He felt entirely trapped by my father's vicious blackmail and the looming threat of a public scandal. He did not care about the money as much as he cared about protecting his family name from my parents' toxic smear campaign. I listened carefully, taking a slow sip of my tea. My father was desperately trying to plug the holes in his sinking ship, completely unaware that he was just accelerating his own total destruction. I looked at Marcus and saw a genuinely good man who had been targeted by a family of professional parasites. "You are not going to sign that document," I told him firmly. "And you are definitely not going to marry my sister. Let Arthur make all the threats he wants. He does not hold any real power." I then explained the conservatorship filing to Marcus. His eyes widened in absolute horror as he realized the true depths of my parents' depravity. They were willing to lock their own daughter in a legal cage just to steal her money. Marcus realized that my family was entirely radioactive. I leaned forward and told him that we needed to turn this extortion attempt back onto them. I told Marcus to tell my father that he needed 24 hours to review the loan documents before signing. We were going to use their own overwhelming greed to set a final, inescapable trap at the upcoming wedding rehearsal dinner. Marcus slowly nodded, a determined fire returning to his eyes. Just as he agreed, the little bell above the coffee shop door chimed brightly. I looked up from my tea and saw Evelyn walking gracefully toward our corner booth. She wore a perfectly tailored charcoal blazer and carried herself with the undeniable quiet authority of a woman who had spent decades presiding over complex federal courtrooms. Marcus immediately stood up to pull out a leather chair for his mother. "I had asked her to join us this morning," Marcus explained quietly as she sat down across from me. "I hope you do not mind my intrusion, Victoria." I realized we need her brilliant legal perspective to navigate this absolute nightmare effectively. I did not mind her presence at all. In fact, looking directly into Evelyn's sharp and highly intelligent eyes, I knew I had just gained the most powerful ally in the entire city. Evelyn politely ordered a cup of black Earl Grey tea from a passing barista before turning her full, undivided attention to me. She folded her manicured hands neatly on the wooden table. "I spent my entire morning making a few discreet phone calls to my former colleagues at the county courthouse," Evelyn said, her voice remarkably smooth and commanding. "I am fully aware of the emergency conservatorship petition your parents filed with Victor Vance. It is a completely baseless and deeply malicious legal filing. But what truly fascinated me the most was what I discovered when I casually looked into your professional background, Victoria." She offered me a rare, genuine smile of profound professional respect. A private equity empire built completely from scratch, successfully managing hundreds of millions in complex assets. You have played an incredibly brilliant game of chess against a toxic family of foolish checkers players. I deeply admire your NSE discipline. It takes profound mental strength to endure their relentless emotional abuse while quietly building a massive financial fortress they could never penetrate. Thank you, Evelyn, I replied honestly, feeling a strange and comforting warmth spreading in my chest. It was the very first time an older mother figure had ever validated my hard work instead of aggressively diminishing it. Evelyn waved her hand dismissively to move the conversation forward. We do not need pleasantries right now. We need a flawless execution strategy. My son is absolutely not marrying into a twisted family of desperate extortionists. But we are also not going to let Arthur and Margaret walk away unscathed after trying to brutally blackmail him and steal your private estate. They deeply insulted my family last night. I do not tolerate foolish insults, and I certainly do not tolerate reckless criminals. Marcus leaned forward over his cold coffee. Victoria wants me to intentionally delay signing the loan document until the rehearsal dinner tomorrow night. She wants to set a public trap. Evelyn's dark eyes gleamed with absolute strategic delight. That is excellent. The rehearsal dinner is being hosted at the Oak Creek Country Club. It is a highly public venue filled with their wealthy peers, influential country club board members, and my esteemed legal guests. Arthur and Margaret have designed this entire event to boldly showcase their fake wealth and solidify their elevated social status among the city elite. I nodded in firm agreement. That is exactly why we must tear their illusion down in that specific room. The conservatorship petition legally forces a mandatory financial discovery phase. By tomorrow afternoon, my corporate attorneys will have legally obtained their full financial records. I want to project their hidden bankruptcy, their multiple foreclosures, and their massive credit card debts onto the wall for every single guest to clearly see. I want everyone to realize they are trying to declare me legally incompetent just so they can steal my hard-earned money to aggressively fund Serena's extravagant lifestyle. Evelyn took a slow, calculated sip of her hot tea. We will coordinate this perfectly. Marcus will bring the unsigned extortion contract to the dinner. When Arthur inevitably corners him and tries to forcefully demand the signature, we will use that exact moment to completely turn the tables. I will personally review the financial documents your lawyers acquire tomorrow to ensure we do not violate any privacy laws that Vance could potentially use against us in court. We will present the evidence as a legally necessary defense against their fraudulent conservatorship claims. It was a truly masterful plan. Evelyn was not just helping me defend my assets. She was actively teaching me how to legally destroy my abusers without leaving a single loophole for Victor Vance to exploit. Are you prepared for the massive fallout, Victoria? Evelyn asked calmly. They will be entirely ruined forever. I am completely prepared, I said without hesitation. They dug their own grave. I left the coffee shop feeling an electric current of anticipation running through my veins. The pieces of my ultimate trap were moving flawlessly into place. As I stepped out into the bright afternoon, my cell phone vibrated again in my purse. It was William, my lead corporate attorney. He informed me that the emergency conservatorship petition had officially been logged by the county clerk. Vance had pushed it through with terrifying speed, leveraging his shady connections within the local courthouse. A process server was already en route to my office to formally deliver the summons. I drove back to the towering glass skyscraper that housed Apex Vanguard Holdings and took the private elevator directly up to the penthouse floor. By the time I walked into my corner office, a stern-looking man in a cheap gray suit was waiting in the lobby. He handed me a thick manila envelope and briskly walked away. I sat down at my black marble desk, sliced the envelope open with a silver letter opener, and spread the documents out in front of me. The sheer volume of lies contained within those pages was staggering. My father had submitted a sworn affidavit claiming I suffered from violent delusions. My mother had attached a fabricated list of my supposedly erratic spending habits, completely omitting the fact that every single dollar they referenced was spent bailing out their golden child, Serena. Just as I finished reading the disgusting legal jargon, my phone screen lit up with a new text message. It was from Margaret. "Give us access to your bank accounts voluntarily," she wrote, her words dripping with a fake, sickening sweetness. "If you just cooperate, we will tell Mr. Vance to drop the court case immediately. We just want to help you, sweetie. You are clearly not well and family needs to stick together." I stared at the text messa. G, completely repulsed by her blatant attempt at psychological manipulation. She was trying to play the role of the concerned, loving mother while simultaneously holding a legal gun directly to my head. They genuinely believed I was weak enough to fold under the pressure of a court battle. They thought the threat of public humiliation would force me to hand over the keys to my financial empire. I did not type out a long, angry response. I did not try to reason with her or defend my sanity. I simply selected a single thumbs-up emoji and hit send. That tiny yellow digital image was the absolute perfect response. It gave them absolutely nothing to use against me, but it secretly signaled my total readiness for the impending war. I could almost picture my mother staring at her phone screen in the mortgaged living room, completely baffled and infuriated by my calm dismissal. I set the phone aside and immediately called William into my office. We had less than 24 hours to compile the most devastating financial dossier this city had ever seen. William arrived with 3 junior analysts carrying massive stacks of encrypted hard drives. The conservatorship filing gave us the absolute legal right to demand my parents' financial disclosures under the strict penalty of perjury. William had already pulled their credit reports, their mortgage histories, and their outstanding tax liens. For the next 5 hours, we sat in my office and meticulously connected the dots of their monumental financial fraud. The picture that emerged was even worse than I had initially suspected. My parents were not just broke. They were drowning in massive debt. They had taken out a second mortgage on a house they barely owned. Their credit cards were maxed out with exorbitant interest rates, and they were 3 months behind on their luxury car lease payments. Serena's wedding expenses alone had pushed them over the edge into absolute bankruptcy. I printed every single document on high-quality legal-sized paper. I placed the bank statements showing Serena's unpaid vendor invoices next to the foreclosure notices my father had hidden from his country club friends. I carefully organized the evidence into a thick black leather binder. This was not just a defense against a frivolous lawsuit. This was a highly weaponized summary of their entire pathetic existence. I closed the heavy binder and locked it inside my wall safe. The calm before the massive storm settled over my office. I looked out the floor-to-ceiling windows at the sprawling city below. Tomorrow night, my family would walk into the Oak Creek Country Club feeling incredibly arrogant, completely convinced they had finally cornered me into submission. They had no idea that I was walking into that exact same room, holding the absolute power to erase their entire social and financial identity forever. I grabbed my car keys, feeling a dark, satisfying smile spread across my face. Let the rehearsal dinner begin. The heavy oak doors of the Oak Creek Country Club stood open, flanked by pristine floral arrangements that my parents could not actually afford. I handed the keys of my Toyota Prius to the valet, ignoring his slightly judgmental glance. Inside, the grand ballroom was a masterclass in complete financial delusion. Massive crystal chandeliers cast a warm golden glow over the 50 guests. Waiters in crisp uniforms circulated with silver trays of expensive champagne. My mother Margaret was holding court near the towering stone fireplace. She was wearing a stunning custom-beaded designer gown that I knew for an absolute fact was purchased on a maxed-out credit card just 3 days ago. She looked like a wealthy matriarch playing the role of high society royalty with sickening enthusiasm. I stood quietly by the entrance, clutching my sleek black designer handbag, which discreetly concealed the digital tablet containing the devastating financial dossier. I watched carefully as Margaret zeroed in on Marcus's family. Evelyn and Marcus's father were standing near the string quartet, looking incredibly elegant. Evelyn wore a beautifully tailored emerald silk suit, projecting effortless sophistication. My mother glided over to them, a condescending smile plastered across her face. "Oh, Evelyn," Margaret cooed loudly, ensuring the nearby country club members could hear every single word. "I am just so thrilled you could make it to our little club tonight. I know these environments can feel a bit overwhelming if you are not accustomed to this level of traditional exclusivity, but please do not feel intimidated. Just ask the catering staff if you need help figuring out the gourmet menu." My mother's tone was dripping with venomous, racially coded microaggressions. She was desperately trying to paint Marcus's highly educated, profoundly successful African-American family as outsiders who should feel incredibly grateful to be allowed into her precious country club space. Evelyn did not flinch. She did know. Raise her voice or show a single ounce of anger. She simply took a slow sip of her sparkling water and looked at my mother with an expression of mild clinical pity. "Thank you for your deep concern, Margaret," Evelyn replied, her voice smooth and carrying a terrifyingly calm authority. "But there is absolutely no need to worry about us. I am actually quite familiar with this specific club. In fact, I sat on the board of directors here for 6 years before I stepped down to accept my federal judicial appointment. I was the one who drafted the updated bylaws, allowing non-legacy members like Arthur to finally purchase a membership." The blood instantly drained from my mother's heavily contoured face. Margaret's jaw tightened, completely paralyzed by the sheer magnitude of Evelyn's polite surgical strike. Several nearby guests, including the current club president, turned their heads and chuckled softly at my mother's profound public embarrassment. Evelyn tilted her head slightly, offering a devastatingly polite smile. "I do hope you are enjoying the luxury amenities, Margaret. It is always so nice to see new members trying their absolute best to fit in." My mother swallowed hard, her eyes darting nervously around the room. She mumbled a hasty, incoherent excuse about needing to check on the catering staff and quickly scurried away toward the kitchen doors. I walked over to Evelyn, completely unable to hide the amused smirk on my face. "That was absolutely brilliant," I whispered as I joined her side. Evelyn kept her eyes straight ahead, watching my mother flee the interaction. "Real wealth is entirely silent, Victoria," Evelyn murmured back to me, taking another sip of water. "Only massive suffocating debt feels the desperate need to scream for attention." We shared a brief, knowing look. The trap was holding perfectly, and my mother had already made a massive fool of herself. Across the lavish room, I saw my anxious father pacing near the private mahogany bar. Arthur was sweating profusely through his rented tuxedo. He was not mingling with the guests or enjoying the expensive champagne he had illegally financed. Instead, his dark eyes were locked entirely onto Marcus. I watched my father anxiously pull a thick, folded legal document from his breast pocket. He tapped his expensive watch aggressively, signaling Marcus to step out into the secluded hallway away from the main party. Serena was standing nearby, nervously biting her lip and avoiding Marcus's gaze. The desperate extortion attempt was finally about to begin. I tightened my grip on my black leather handbag and took a very long, deep breath to steady my racing pulse. I was entirely ready to boldly step right into that dimly lit hallway, confidently intercept that highly fraudulent loan contract from his trembling hands, and finally begin the highly anticipated meticulous process of tearing their totally fake, carefully constructed world completely apart, piece by satisfying piece. I walked quietly out of the bustling main ballroom and stepped into the quiet carpeted hallway leading toward the private restrooms. Just around the corner, I found my father, Arthur, cornering Marcus. He had Marcus backed against the stone wall. The legal document was shoved into Marcus's chest. "Listen to me very carefully, Marcus," my father hissed, his voice tight with aggressive desperation. "You are marrying my beautiful daughter tomorrow. You are marrying into my prestigious family. With that immense privilege comes certain unwritten financial responsibilities. The wedding planner needs a $200,000 wire transfer by midnight tonight, or the entire event is officially canceled. Serena will be completely devastated, and I will personally make sure every single person in this city knows you were the one who broke her heart and backed out on your solemn financial commitments." Marcus stood his ground, his jaw clenched tightly. He looked down at the paper and then back up at my sweating father. "Arthur, I am not signing a predatory loan agreement," Marcus said, his voice low and firm. "You are attempting to extort me for a wedding that you clearly cannot afford. This has absolutely nothing to do with my commitment to Serena and everything to do with your profound financial mismanagement." My father's face turned a violent shade of purple. He jabbed his thick index finger hard against Marcus's chest. "Listen here, you arrogant punk," my father growled, leaning close. "You will sign this paper right now, or I will walk back into that ballroom and announce to my wealthy friends that you physically assaulted my daughter. I will ruin your pristine medical career before it even begins. You think your mother can protect you from a public scandal. You sign it, or the wedding is completely dead, and I am keeping the diamond ring." That was my absolute cue. I stepped out from the shadows of the hallway, completely abandoning my silent observation. I walked briskly toward them, my high heels clicking sharply against the polished marble floor. My father turned his head, startled by the sudden noise, but before he could even register my presence, I reached out and snatched the thick contract right out of his trembling hands. "Hey, what do you think you're doing?" my father shouted, lunging forward to grab the document back. I quickly stepped out of his reach, holding the paper up to the dim hallway light. I scanned the first page, pretending to be deeply interested in the legal jargon. "A $200,000 promissory note at an 8% interest rate," I read aloud, my voice echoing in the empty corridor. "Really, Arthur? You are trying to act like a high-rolling mafia boss in a rented tuxedo. It is honestly pathetic." "Give that back to me right now, Victoria," my father demanded, his hands balled into tight, aggressive fists. "You are completely out of your mind. This is exactly why we filed that court petition against you. You have absolutely no right to interfere in my private family business." I looked directly into his panicked eyes. "You are right," I said calmly. "I have no right to interfere, but as the person who actually paid for the engagement ring you are currently trying to steal, I think I get a vote." Without breaking eye contact with my father, I gripped the thick stack of papers with both hands and ripped the entire contract perfectly in half. I let the torn pages flutter down onto the marble floor like cheap, worthless confetti. My father let out a loud, guttural scream of pure, unfiltered rage. "You stupid, ungrateful brat," he roared, his face contorting into an ugly mask of hatred. "You just destroyed Serena's entire future." The loud shouting instantly attracted attention. The heavy ballroom doors swung violently open. Serena and Margaret rushed out into the hallway, followed closely by several curious country club guests who had heard the massive commotion. Serena took one look at the torn contract scattered across the floor and let out a piercing, dramatic shriek. She ran over and dropped to her knees, frantically trying to piece the shredded paper back together. "What did you do?" Serena screamed, pointing a shaking, manicured finger directly at my face. "You are a sick, jealous monster. You came here just to ruin my perfect life." She scrambled to her feet, her designer dress wrinkling in the process. She turned toward a nearby staff member who was watching the scene unfold in complete shock. "Security!" Serena shrieked at the top of her lungs. "Call the country club security right now. I want this crazy woman physically thrown out immediately. She is violently attacking my family." Marcus stepped between us, shielding me as I held my handbag tightly. He raised his hands, warning my father to back away. Arthur was breathing heavily, but he hesitated when he saw the icy determination in Marcus's eyes. Serena continued to scream for the country club security guards, who were making their way down the hallway. "Sir, is there a problem here?" one guard asked, looking nervously between my furious father and my perfectly calm demeanor. My mother Margaret arrived right behind the guards, panting heavily. "She is trespassing," Margaret shrieked, pointing a shaking finger at me. "She is violently unstable and actively trying to ruin my daughter's rehearsal dinner. Escort her off the premises right this second." I gently placed my hand on Marcus's shoulder and stepped around him, completely ignoring my hysterical mother. "I am not trespassing," I said RLY, pulling my gold-embossed country club membership card from my handbag and holding it up for the guards to see. "I am a fully paying platinum member of this establishment, and I am making my way back to the main ballroom." The security guards looked at the elite card and took a step back, unwilling to forcefully remove a high-tier member. Instead of heading toward the exit doors, I turned on my heel and walked briskly back into the grand ballroom. The string quartet was still playing a soft, romantic melody, and the wealthy guests were happily sipping their expensive champagne, completely unaware of the massive conflict that had just occurred in the hallway. I did not walk back to my assigned table. I walked directly toward the elevated audiovisual booth situated at the far end of the room. The young technician sitting behind the soundboard looked up in surprise as I confidently entered his designated workspace. "Excuse me, miss, you are not allowed back here," he started to say, but I simply handed him a crisp $100 bill and pointed to the main projection system. "I need to display a presentation for the bride and groom," I told him firmly. The technician happily took the cash and stepped aside, pointing to the main connection cable. I unzipped my designer handbag and pulled out the sleek digital tablet containing the devastating financial dossier my corporate attorneys had compiled. I plugged the connection cable directly into my device. With a few quick taps on the screen, I synced the tablet to the main ballroom system. First, I disabled the audio feed. The soft, romantic string quartet music was instantly cut off mid-note. The sudden, jarring silence echoed loudly through the massive room, causing every single guest to stop talking and turn their attention toward the front of the ballroom. Next, I activated the main visual projector. The heavy mechanical gears hummed loudly above us, and a blindingly bright white light shot across the room. It illuminated the massive blank wall directly behind the lavish head table, where Serena was supposed to sit. The guests naturally expected to see a beautiful romantic slideshow featuring childhood photos of the bride and groom. Instead, they were greeted by the stark, highly clinical interface of a massive financial spreadsheet. I picked up the main wireless microphone from the audio board and flipped the switch to the ON position. The microphone let out a sharp feedback whine, making wealthy guests wince and cover their ears. My father Arthur and my mother Margaret burst through the hallway doors just as the image came into perfect focus. They froze, completely paralyzed by absolute terror. Projected in massive, bold letters across the entire back wall were official bank logos, highly confidential account numbers, and undeniable legal foreclosure notices. Serena stumbled into the ballroom right behind them, clutching the torn pieces of the extortion contract. She looked up at the wall, and her jaw dropped in utter confusion. She did not understand what she was looking at because she had never been forced to look at a real financial document. But the corporate executives and wealthy elite in the audience immediately recognized the severe legal documents glaring down at them. I stepped out of the audiovisual booth, holding the microphone tightly in my right hand. I stood in the center of the room surrounded by silent guests. My voice boomed clearly through the surround sound speakers, cutting through the heavy tension in the air. "Good evening, everyone," I said smoothly, looking directly at my deeply terrified parents. My parents recently filed a legal petition claiming I am mentally unfit to manage my own money. They claim they are financially responsible enough to take over my estate. So, I thought tonight would be the perfect opportunity to transparently review their impressive financial portfolio with all of their very closest elite friends. "Let us start by looking at my sister Serena," I said, tapping the screen of my tablet. A giant high-resolution image of a red Porsche Macan flashed onto the wall alongside a highly detailed dealership invoice. Serena loves to post videos of herself driving this exact luxury vehicle, telling her 50,000 followers that she bought it entirely with her own hard-earned brand deal money. But the dealership contract displayed behind me tells a very different story. It is not owned. It is a lease signed by our father, Arthur. And according to the bold, red letters from the financing department, that lease is currently 3 full months past due. The dealership has already issued a formal repossession order. Your luxury car is going to be towed away at any moment, Serena. Serena let out a choked gasp and covered her face with her hands. Several wealthy women sitting near the front of the room began to openly whisper to each other, casting judgmental glances at my sister. The illusion of her glamorous internet lifestyle was crumbling right in front of her future in-laws. Marcus stood firmly beside his mother, Evelyn, watching the entire spectacle with a look of pure vindication. He finally saw the absolute truth about the woman he had almost married. I tapped the screen again, completely ignoring my sister's tears. "Now, let us move on to the financial stability of the two people who are actively petitioning a judge to seize my private assets," I announced clearly. The slide changed to a massive pie chart accompanied by scanned copies of several platinum credit card statements. Arthur and Margaret have spent the last decade portraying themselves as incredibly successful pillars of this community. They brag about their country club membership, their lavish vacations, and their designer wardrobes. However, the reality of their bank accounts is entirely horrifying. Right now, my parents are carrying exactly $150,000 in unsecured credit card debt. A loud collective gasp rippled through the grand ballroom. In high society circles, carrying that much high-interest revolving debt was considered incredibly vulgar and profoundly embarrassing. My mother, Margaret, turned a sickly shade of gray. She frantically looked around the room, making desperate eye contact with the country club president, but he simply looked away in disgust. I zoomed in on one specific line item from a recent statement. For example, I continued, my voice echoing relentlessly through the silent room. That stunning custom beaded gown my mother is wearing right now. It is absolutely beautiful, Margaret. But you purchased it 3 days ago using a credit card with a 24% interest rate that has already exceeded its maximum limit. You do not even own the clothes on your own back, yet you firmly believe you have the right to legally declare me incompetent and steal my private wealth. My father, Arthur, finally snapped. He aggressively shoved his way past a waiter, knocking a silver tray of champagne glasses onto the floor. The glass shattered violently, but nobody moved to clean it up. "Shut it off right now," Arthur roared, his face drenched in panic and sweat. "You are violating our privacy. This is completely illegal." "You stole these documents. I am calling the police." I stood my ground in the center of the ballroom, completely unfazed by his aggressive outburst. "I did not steal anything, Arthur," I replied smoothly, holding the microphone steady. "You filed a malicious legal conservatorship petition against me yesterday morning. By legally questioning my financial competency in a court of law, you automatically opened your own financial records to the mandatory discovery process. My corporate attorneys legally subpoenaed every single document you see on this wall. You handed me the exact weapon I am currently using to destroy your fake reputation." My mother let out a loud, pathetic wail and collapsed into a nearby chair, burying her face in her hands. The entire room was staring at them with absolute contempt. The wealthy elite they had desperately tried to impress were now looking at them like they were a highly contagious disease. They were exposed as absolute frauds, desperately swimming in overwhelming debt, trying to exploit their own daughter just to maintain a pathetic social illusion. But I was not finished. The credit card debt and the leased car were just the appetizers. I had one final document to project onto that wall, and it was the ultimate death blow to their entire existence. I took a deep breath, looked directly at my sweating father, and tapped the digital screen one more time. "Let us talk about your severely depleted bank accounts and your entirely foreclosed family home," I stated boldly, watching him panic right here in this massive grand ballroom. Before I could even swipe my finger across the digital tablet to reveal the final devastating slide, my mother, Margaret, suddenly sprang from her chair. She pushed her way to the front of the room, placing herself directly between the massive projector screen and the shocked, wealthy country club guests. "Do not listen to a single word she is saying," Margaret screamed, her voice cracking with desperate hysteria. "She is completely insane. My daughter is suffering from a severe psychotic break right in front of all of you. She is dangerously unwell, and she fabricated these financial documents to maliciously punish us today." My mother swept her arms out wide, playing the role of the tragic, terrified parent with absolute theatrical perfection. "It is true," she wailed loudly, ensuring the country club president and the board members heard her tragic plea. "Arthur and I had to file an emergency legal conservatorship petition just yesterday morning. We had to ask a federal judge to step in and forcefully take control of her life because she is completely losing her mind. She is a danger to herself and to this entire family. She is a deeply sick woman spinning paranoid delusions right now." A heavy murmur of confusion rippled through the grand ballroom. The wealthy guests exchanged incredibly uneasy glances. Mental illness was a highly taboo subject in these elite social circles, and the sudden mention of a court-ordered conservatorship made several people step back in visible discomfort. Serena quickly seized the opportunity and rushed to her mother's side, nodding vigorously. "She is obsessed with me," Serena cried, dabbing her dry eyes. "She hired hackers to create fake bank statements just to ruin my wedding. She needs to be locked in a hospital." My father, Arthur, stood a few feet away, wiping the thick sweat from his forehead. He suddenly looked incredibly smug, believing his wife had brilliantly managed to turn the wealthy crowd against me by weaponizing the stigma of mental health. He crossed his arms and glared at me, expecting me to finally break down in panic under the heavy weight of their united public assault. I did not panic. I did not even raise my voice. I simply let them finish their pathetic, desperate performance. I held the wireless microphone up to my mouth and offered my mother a chillingly polite smile. "You are absolutely right, Margaret," I said, my voice perfectly steady and echoing through the surround sound speakers. "You did indeed file a legal conservatorship petition yesterday morning claiming I was completely incompetent." and you hired Victor Vance to aggressively push it through the county courthouse." My mother lifted her chin triumphantly. "She admitted it," Margaret shouted to the crowd. I raised my hand, calling for total silence. "However," I continued smoothly, "what you do not know is that my corporate legal team intercepted your highly fraudulent filing before you even finished picking out your rented tuxedo, Arthur." I tapped the screen of my digital tablet. The massive pie charts and the credit card statements instantly vanished from the wall. They were immediately replaced by a stark official legal document bearing the heavy gold seal of the county courthouse and the bold signature of a presiding judge. "Let us read this together," I announced clearly, pointing at the projected document. "This is an official judicial dismissal, stamped and signed just 3 hours ago. The judge reviewed your emergency petition, reviewed the overwhelming evidence of your severe financial fraud, and threw your case out of court with extreme prejudice. He legally declared your claims to be entirely baseless, deeply malicious, and a blatant abuse of the judicial system." The smug expression instantly melted right off my father's face. Margaret gasped, stumbling backward as if she had been physically struck. But the projector screen had even more terrible news waiting for them. I tapped the tablet one more time, bringing up a second heavily redacted legal document right next to the judicial dismissal. "And because I do not tolerate people trying to steal my absolute freedom," I added, my tone dropping to a dangerous icy register, "my corporate law firm has officially filed a massive countersuit against both of you. You are now being sued for severe defamation, malicious prosecution, and the attempted fraudulent seizure of my private assets. I'm also coming after you for every single dollar in legal fees my attorneys accumulated while dismantling your pathetic little scam today." The ballroom fell completely dead silent once again. The guests stared at the wall, absorbing the undeniable legal truth. There was no psychotic break. There was no delusion. There was only a successful woman systematically destroying the parasites who had tried to consume her. Marcus and Evelyn stood watching them completely exposed to the world. But my father, Arthur, was a man who simply could not accept defeat. Even as the legal documents proving his massive fraud burned brightly on the wall behind him, he desperately scrambled to find one last shred of superiority to hold over my head. He puffed out his chest and pointed an aggressive finger at me, his face twisting into an ugly mask of pure spite. "You think you are so smart, Victoria," Arthur yelled, his voice cracking slightly as it echoed through the massive ballroom. "You think flashing some legal paperwork makes you better than us. You are just a jealous, pathetic little girl. You are incredibly jealous because you rent a tiny, cramped apartment downtown, while your mother and I live in a stunning 5-bedroom mansion in the most exclusive gated community in this entire state. We have a heated pool and a manicured lawn, and you have absolutely nothing. You will never achieve the level of luxury and status that we have built." A few of the country club guests actually cringed at his desperate outburst. It was the frantic flailing of a drowning man trying to pull someone else under the water with him. I stood completely still, holding the wireless microphone, and allowed his arrogant words to ring out in the absolute silence of the room. I did not low. Okay, angry. I actually felt a genuine wave of profound pity for the man standing before me. He had tied his entire identity to a brick structure that he did not even possess. "Are you quite finished, Arthur?" I asked calmly, my voice cutting through the heavy tension like a sharp knife. "Because since you brought up your stunning 5-bedroom mansion, I think it is only fair that we show your elite friends exactly who really owns that property." I swiped my finger across the digital tablet one final time. The legal countersuit documents vanished from the massive projector screen. They were instantly replaced by a series of highly official real estate records. On the left side of the screen was a stark red foreclosure notice issued by a major national bank exactly 2 years ago. It boldly listed Arthur and Margaret as the severely defaulted borrowers. On the right side of the screen was a newly minted property deed bearing the official county clerk seal. My father turned around to look at the wall, and all the aggressive bluster instantly drained from his body. His jaw fell slack. My mother, Margaret, let out a soft, horrifying whimper as she recognized the address of her beloved luxury home projected in massive black letters. 2 years ago, I explained, my voice steady and commanding, the bank officially foreclosed on your beautiful luxury mansion. You had defaulted on your massive second mortgage, and you were exactly 48 hours away from being physically locked out on the street by the county sheriff. Do you remember that terrifying week, Arthur? Do you remember telling Margaret that a miraculous, anonymous private holding company had suddenly stepped in at the very last second, purchased your distressed debt from the bank, and graciously allowed you to remain in the house on a month-to-month lease agreement? Arthur could not speak. He just stared blankly at the glowing property deed on the wall, his hands trembling uncontrollably at his sides. You spent the last 2 years bragging to everyone in this country club about your expensive home, I continued, relentlessly pacing slowly across the ballroom floor. You used that house to belittle me, to call me a failure, to make yourselves feel vastly superior to my modest lifestyle. But the truth is, you do not own a single brick of that property. You do not own the heated pool. You do not own the manicured lawn. You are nothing but month-to-month tenants living entirely on borrowed time. I stopped pacing and turned to face my completely broken parents directly. I pointed up at the name of the private holding company listed clearly at the very top of the official property deed. Apex Vanguard Holdings. That private holding company is mine, I announced, my voice echoing with absolute finality. I bought your defaulted debt in cash. I saved you from absolute homelessness while you were busy mocking my beat-up car and my practical clothes. You are not wealthy aristocrats living in a family estate. You are my tenants. I own the house you sleep in. I own the ground you walk on. I am your landlord. The sheer magnitude of this shocking revelation hit the quiet ballroom like a massive physical shockwave, completely stunning the wealthy guests who stood frozen in absolute and total disbelief. The silence in the grand ballroom was so profound that you could clearly hear the soft hum of the massive projector fan spinning above us. My father, Arthur, looked like a man who had just stepped on a live landmine. His mouth opened and closed repeatedly, but no sound came out. My mother Margaret had completely stopped her theatrical crying. She was gripping the edge of a nearby chair, her knuckles turning stark white as the horrifying reality of her situation finally sank fully into her panicked mind. The country club guests who had previously tolerated my parents' arrogant boasting were now actively backing away from them. I did not give them a single moment to catch their breath. I reached into my sleek black designer handbag one final time. I pulled out a thick stack of official legal documents bound tightly by a heavy metal clip. I walked slowly across the polished hardwood floor, my high heels clicking loudly with every single deliberate step. I stopped directly in front of the lavish head table, where Serena was still clutching the torn pieces of the ruined extortion contract. I raised the thick stack of papers high into the air so every single person in the room could clearly see what I was holding. Then I slammed the documents down onto the center of the table right next to Serena's crystal champagne flute. I picked up the wireless microphone again and looked Arthur right in the eye. That, Arthur, is your official 30-day notice of eviction, I announced clearly. You see, for the last 2 years, I was perfectly content to let you live quietly in that massive house. I was perfectly content to let you play pretend with your wealthy country club friends. I paid the exorbitant property taxes. I paid the expensive homeowner's insurance completely out of my pocket. I asked for absolutely nothing in return. I just wanted you to leave me alone so I could live my life in peace. My mother let out a sharp, terrified gasp. You cannot do this to us, Margaret cried desperately. Where are we supposed to go? We have absolutely no money and no credit. We will be completely homeless, Victoria. I turned my gaze toward her, feeling absolutely zero sympathy for her highly manipulative and entirely fake tragic tears. You should have thought about that before you hired Victor Vance, I replied coldly. You should have thought about your precarious living situation before you went to a federal courthouse and tried to legally steal my private estate. By filing that malicious conservatorship petition, you actively proved that you are fundamentally untrustworthy and deeply hostile. A strictly corporate perspective, you instantly became a severe financial liability to Apex Vanguard Holdings. And as the chief executive officer of that firm, I am legally obligated to liquidate toxic assets. I gestured toward the formal eviction papers sitting on the wooden table. The property goes on the open real estate market tomorrow morning. You have exactly 30 days to pack up your designer clothes, your rented furniture, and whatever dignity you think you have left. If you are not completely moved out of that house by the first day of next month, I will personally have the county sheriff arrive at the property to physically remove your belongings and change every single lock on the doors." Arthur stumbled backward, his knees buckling slightly. He reached out and grabbed the back of a nearby dining chair tightly to stop himself from collapsing. "But we are your family," Arthur pleaded, a pathetic, desperate whine replacing his usual arrogant tone. "You cannot throw your own blood out into the street. People will think you are a total monster." I let out a short, hollow laugh. "No, Arthur," I corrected him smoothly, gesturing to the room full of horrified, wealthy guests. "People will think I am a brilliant businesswoman who finally stopped funding a family of incredibly ungrateful parasites. You dug this massive grave with your own overwhelming greed. Now you get to sleep in it tonight." The silence that followed my final declaration was suddenly broken by a sharp, high-pitched wail. It did not come from my mother. It came from Serena. My younger sister was standing near the front table, her face completely distorted by a mixture of profound panic and intense rage. She looked at the official eviction notice, and then she slowly turned to look at my parents. The beautiful, innocent facade she had carefully maintained for her social media followers completely evaporated in an instant. "You lied to me," Serena screamed, her voice cracking loudly. She stomped her expensive designer heel onto the hardwood floor, pointing a shaking finger directly at my father. "You told me you had millions of dollars tied up in overseas investments, Arthur. You told me this wedding was entirely paid for. You told me I was going to be the most beautiful, wealthy bride this city had ever seen. And now you are telling me you are completely bankrupt and getting evicted by my own sister. You have ruined my entire life." My mother reached out, trying to soothe her golden child. "Sweetheart, please calm down," Margaret pleaded, tears streaming down her face. "We were just trying to protect you." "Do not touch me," Serena shrieked violently, swatting my mother's hand away. "You are pathetic. Both of you are completely pathetic. You are nothing but broke, embarrassing frauds. How am I supposed to maintain my internet brand now? I cannot be associated with poor people. I will completely lose all my brand deals." My father looked absolutely devastated. The golden child he had sacrificed my future and his own financial stability for was now publicly discarding him the absolute second the money ran dry. Serena quickly turned her back on our sobbing parents and locked her desperate eyes onto Marcus. She ran across the room and grabbed both of his hands tightly. Her tears instantly stopped, and a frantic, manipulative smile stretched across her face. "Marcus, baby," she said, her voice suddenly dripping with a sickening artificial sweetness. "We do not need them. We do not need this massive, expensive wedding or these awful people. We can just leave right now. We can elope." Marcus stared down at her, his face completely devoid of any emotion. "Elope?" he asked quietly. "Yes," Serena nodded vigorously, digging her manicured nails into his hands. "We can fly to Las Vegas tonight or go to the courthouse tomorrow morning." "You are a highly successful orthopedic surgeon, Marcus. You make an incredible salary. You can easily pay off my credit cards, and we can just start our own beautiful, wealthy life together. I will completely cut off my talks. Ike bankrupt parents. I will even sign a postnuptial agreement if your mother wants me to. You promised to take care of me, Marcus." The absolute audacity of her words hung heavily in the air. In her frantic desperation to secure a new source of funding, she had openly admitted that she viewed Marcus as nothing more than a human bank account. Evelyn stood a few feet away, her posture perfectly straight. She did not say a single word, but her sharp eyes analyzed Serena with the cold precision of a federal judge issuing a life sentence. She had seen right through my sister from the very beginning. Marcus gently but very firmly pried Serena's manicured fingers off his hands. He took a deliberate step backward, physically distancing himself from her desperate grasp. "You want us to elope?" Marcus asked, his voice low and incredibly steady. "You want me to just ignore everything that just happened in this room, pay off your massive hidden debts, and fund your fake internet lifestyle while you completely abandon your bankrupt family?" Serena nodded eagerly. "Yes, exactly," she whispered, her eyes wide with frantic hope. Marcus slowly shook his head. "You do not even understand what the word perfect means, Serena," he said quietly. "You think perfection is a leased luxury car and a fake engagement ring. You think it is smiling for a camera while actively destroying the people around you." He turned away from her and walked purposefully toward the audiovisual booth where I was standing. He reached out, and I handed him the wireless microphone. Marcus turned to face the entire ballroom. "My family values integrity above all else," Marcus announced, his deep voice echoing through the massive room. We value honesty, hard work, and protecting the people we love. Evelyn and my father built our family name by standing up for what is right, even when it is incredibly difficult. He turned his gaze back to Serena. You have absolutely no integrity, Marcus stated firmly. You lied to me about the ring. You lied to your followers about your wealth. And worst of all, you stood by and eagerly watched your parents try to legally destroy your own sister just so you could afford a lavish party. You are not a victim here. You are a willing participant in a highly toxic, deeply abusive system. Serena let out a choked sob. Marcus, please, she begged. The wedding is officially canceled, Marcus continued. There will be no ceremony tomorrow. There will be no elopement to Las Vegas. I am entirely done with this family. My mother Margaret let out another loud theatrical wail, collapsing back into her chair. Arthur buried his face in his hands, completely broken and humiliated. But Marcus was not finished cleaning up the wreckage. He walked back over to Serena and held out his right hand, palm up. Since Victoria was the one who actually paid for that 3-carat diamond ring, Marcus said, his voice leaving no room for argument, I believe it is time you return it. I am not leaving this building while you are still wearing stolen property. Serena gasped, clutching her left hand to her chest. No, she whined. It is mine. It was a gift. It was a gift based entirely on a massive fraudulent lie, Marcus countered, stepping closer. Take it off, Serena. Do not make me ask the country club security to forcefully remove it from your hand. The mention of the security guards finally broke her. With a trembling hand and fresh tears streaming down her contoured face, Serena slowly slid the massive diamond ring off her finger. She dropped it into Marcus's outstretched palm with a soft metallic clink. Marcus closed his fist around the ring and turned toward his parents. Evelyn, father, he said clearly. We are leaving. Please gather the rest of our family members and head to the exits. There is absolutely nothing left for us to celebrate here tonight. Evelyn offered a crisp, satisfied nod. She turned and began gracefully ushering the extended family members out of the grand ballroom, leaving the toxic wreckage of my family entirely behind them. But Arthur could not let it end this way. Watching his prestigious future in-laws walk out was the final blow to his fragile ego. He snapped, his face contorted into an unrecognizable mask of pure fury, and he turned his burning eyes directly toward me. You did this, he roared, his voice echoing violently. He lunged forward, closing the distance between us with heavy stomping strides. His hands were curled into tight fists. Before he could come within arm's reach of me, a solid wall of tailored suits materialized out of nowhere, blocking his path completely. Marcus had not left the room with his mother. He had stayed behind, anticipating my father's violent reaction, and several of his tall, athletic cousins had stayed right beside him. They stepped seamlessly in front of me, creating an impenetrable physical barrier. Marcus stood dead center, looking down at Arthur with eyes as cold as ice. Take one more step toward her, Arthur, Marcus warned, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. Just take one single step, and I will ensure you leave this country club in the back of a police cruiser before you even have a chance to pack your bags for the eviction. My father froze instantly, intimidated by the sheer physical presence of the men standing firmly before him. He was a coward who only knew how to bully women and children behind closed doors. His aggressive posture completely crumbled, and he took a shaky step backward. Seeing her husband utterly humiliated, my mother Margaret decided to deploy her absolute final weapon. She let out a loud, ear-piercing shriek and dramatically threw herself onto the polished hardwood floor. She collapsed in a heap of expensive designer fabric, clutching her chest and gasping loudly for air as if she were suffering a sudden massive heart attack. Please, somebody help me, she wailed, thrashing her arms wildly. My heart is failing. Call an ambulance immediately. It was a performance worthy of a daytime soap opera, but the reaction from the room was completely unprecedented. Tonight, under the harsh, bright light of the projector screen exposing her massive financial frauds, the wealthy country club guests saw right through her pathetic charade. Nobody rushed to her side. The waiters continued quietly clearing the tables. The country club president simply turned his back and walked away in disgust. I calmly reached over to the audiovisual soundboard, unplugged my digital tablet, and slipped it securely back into my sleek black designer handbag. I took one final look around the grand ballroom, taking in the absolute destruction of their fake, carefully constructed world. It was a beautiful, satisfying ruin. Thank you, Marcus, I said quietly, touching his shoulder. He turned and offered me a small, genuine smile of profound mutual respect. You do not ever have to deal with them again, Victoria, he replied softly. Let us get you out of here. I walked confidently out of the grand ballroom, my high heels clicking sharply against the marble floor. I pushed open the heavy oak doors of the country club and stepped out into the cool, refreshing night air. The valet brought my beat-up Toyota Prius to the front entrance, and I slid into the driver's seat, feeling a massive, suffocating weight finally lift off my shoulders. I was entirely free. I drove back to my peaceful penthouse overlooking the city, feeling a profound sense of quiet closure. I slept soundly for the first time in years, but while I was resting comfortably, the sheer magnitude of the disaster I had orchestrated was actively rippling through my family's entire social network. By 8:00 the next morning, the story of my parents' massive financial fraud, their fake luxury mansion, and the dramatic cancellation of Serena's wedding had spread through the elite suburban community faster than a raging wildfire. I woke up, poured myself a cup of fresh espresso, and opened my laptop to check my email. The first message I saw was a highly formal notification from the Oak Creek Country Club Board of Directors. They had sent a mass email officially announcing the immediate termination of Arthur and Margaret's Platinum membership due to severe breaches of conduct and overwhelming financial insolvency. Because Serena's wedding was supposed to take place that exact afternoon, the high-end vendors had naturally expected their final massive payments by midnight. When my father's empty bank accounts failed to wire the necessary $200,000, the vendors immediately pulled the plug. The luxury floral company repossessed every single imported white rose. The five-star catering company canceled the entire menu and threatened to sue. Serena woke up on her supposed wedding day to find out she didn't even have a cake. Worse yet, one of the younger country club guests had anonymously leaked a highly detailed account of the rehearsal dinner drama to a popular local gossip blog. The post went viral instantly. I casually navigated to Serena's social media page. It was an absolute digital bloodbath. The comment section was flooded with thousands of angry messages calling her a cheap fraud and a desperate gold digger. Several prominent lifestyle brands publicly announced they were immediately terminating their lucrative partnership contracts with her. Her entire digital empire was burning to the ground in real time. My cell phone buzzed. It was William, my corporate attorney. "Good morning, Victoria," William said, his voice humming with deep professional satisfaction. "I just received a frantic call from Victor Vance. He formally withdrew as your parents' legal counsel this morning. He realized they were completely broke and could not pay his massive hourly rate. The process server also successfully delivered the official 30-day eviction notice, and our massive countersuit is moving forward. They are entirely ruined. Excel." "And work, William," I replied smoothly. "Let them face the very real consequences of their own overwhelming greed." Exactly 30 days later, I found myself sitting quietly in the driver's seat of my reliable Toyota Prius, parked safely down the street from the luxury mansion my parents used to call their own. Today was the final day of their eviction notice, and I wanted to witness the absolute conclusion of the massive lie they had forced me to live under. I rolled my window down just a crack and watched as a heavy industrial tow truck backed slowly into the driveway. The target was Serena's bright red luxury Porsche Macan. Serena burst out of the heavy mahogany front doors wearing faded sweatpants and an oversized hoodie. She ran down the driveway, waving her arms frantically, begging the driver to give her just one more week. But the driver calmly hooked the heavy steel chains to the undercarriage and engaged the hydraulic winch. Serena dropped to her knees right there on the pristine concrete driveway, watching in absolute horror as her ultimate status symbol was dragged away. As the tow truck pulled away, a battered rented moving box truck backed into the exact same spot. Two exhausted-looking movers stepped out and began hauling my parents' belongings out. Without the dim romantic lighting of the country club, their velvet couches and gold-painted accents looked incredibly cheap and badly worn. My father Arthur finally emerged from the house carrying a cardboard box. His shoulders were slumped heavily, and he dragged his feet. My mother Margaret followed closely behind him, carrying a plastic garbage bag full of her designer clothes. There was absolutely no one left for her to perform for. The elite neighbors were safely hidden behind drawn curtains, ignoring the embarrassing spectacle. I knew they were moving into a highly cramped two-bedroom apartment in a heavily industrialized neighborhood on the complete opposite side of the city. Serena would have to share a tiny bathroom with her parents, and Arthur would have to park his heavily financed sedan on a crowded public street. I watched them load the last of their cheap cardboard boxes into the back of the rented truck. I simply felt a profound and overwhelming sense of quiet peace. I started the engine of my car and drove away without looking in my rearview mirror. A few weeks later, my private cell phone buzzed. The caller ID displayed my father's phone number. I picked up the phone and pressed it to my ear without saying a single greeting. "Victoria," my father said, his voice cracking and trembling. "Please do not hang up. We are really struggling out here. This new apartment is terrible. Serena cannot find a job. All of our wealthy friends have abandoned us." He paused, clearly waiting for me to express warm sympathy. When I offered nothing but cold silence, he continued. "I know we made terrible mistakes. I know I was wrong to file that conservatorship petition. You completely destroyed us. But we are still family. We share the same blood. I was hoping that maybe, since you are doing so incredibly well, you could find it in your heart to give us a small loan. Just $50,000 to help us get back on our feet." I listened to his pathetic speech, feeling absolutely nothing but clinical disgust. "Arthur," I said, my voice dripping with icy professionalism, "do you remember what you said to me at that restaurant just a few weeks ago? You loudly announced to Marcus's entire family that you had to cut me off because I needed to learn independence. You told everyone that I could not live off handouts from my parents forever." My father let out a quiet, desperate whimper. "Well, I took your advice to heart," I told him, my tone devoid of emotion. "I stopped living off handouts. Dad, you should try it." Before he could utter another pathetic excuse, I pulled the phone away and ended the call. I permanently blocked his number along with Margaret and Serena's. The cord was finally cut forever. Late November quickly arrived, bringing the familiar holiday chill. This Thanksgiving, I was not spending the holiday alone. Instead, I pulled my car into the long, sweeping driveway of a stunning brick estate. I walked up the wide stone steps holding a freshly baked pecan pie and a bottle of vintage wine. The front door swung open, and Evelyn stood there wearing a beautiful crimson dress with a warm, genuine smile. "Welcome home, Victoria," she said warmly, pulling me into a deep, comforting hug. The house was alive with loud, joyous laughter and the comforting sounds of genuine connection. Marcus walked out of the kitchen wearing a casual sweater, giving me a firm, friendly hug. In the months since the rehearsal dinner disaster, Marcus and I had developed a profound platonic friendship. We were simply two highly driven professionals who had survived a massive collision with a toxic family and emerged stronger. Evelyn ushered everyone into the grand dining room. As ever. Yon settled down. Marcus's father stood at the head of the table to deliver the traditional Thanksgiving blessing. He spoke beautifully about gratitude, resilience, and the profound importance of chosen family. I closed my eyes and listened to his deep, resonant voice, feeling a strange prickle of tears behind my eyelids. They were tears of absolute relief. Evelyn leaned over and gently touched my arm. "I am so glad you decided to join us today, Victoria," she said. "You belong at a table where your presence is genuinely celebrated, not merely tolerated." For 33 years, I had believed that family was a mandatory life sentence. Sitting at this beautiful table, I realized the absolute truth. A real family does not view you as a financial asset. They celebrate your victories and stand beside you when the world tries to tear you down. I occasionally hear brief updates about my parents and Serena. They are still living in that cramped two-bedroom apartment. My father works a low-level sales job. My mother complains bitterly, and Serena works as a front desk receptionist at a local public gym. They spend their time blaming me for their downfall. But the most beautiful part of my reality is that their daily misery no longer affects me. They are just distant ghosts fading entirely into the background of my vibrant life. The greatest revenge is waking up on a quiet Tuesday morning, pouring a cup of hot espresso, and realizing that you feel entirely safe in your own home. It is building an untouchable, beautiful life that they will never be allowed to access or destroy ever again. The heavy iron chains of my painful past were completely shattered. My private financial empire was entirely secure. My chosen family was genuine and deeply supportive. I was completely free. Thank you so much for listening to my story today. If you have ever had to walk away from highly toxic people to violently protect your own mental peace, I want you to know that you are incredibly brave. Please share your own personal experiences in the comments section below, because your unique story might be the exact inspiration someone else desperately needs to finally break free. Hit the like button and subscribe to this channel for more stories of personal triumph. Always remember that your true worth is never defined by those who completely failed to value you. Keep building your own beautiful, untouchable life and never ever look back at them. You absolutely deserve to experience massive, endless peace and joy.